this time with Catelyn. Their drinking sessions invariably ended badly. Catelyn knew about the other women in Dylan's life, and he knew that she too had been unfaithful.
I beat the Jesus out of him. It was always after the pubs, just before getting into bed kind of thing. I threw myself at him, or caught a hold of him and just bang him on the floor, and so I was really quite nervous myself that I might have killed, knocked him out. I think we probably sort of got into bed and passed out, and then when we came to, we were all kind of all over each other and very tender and apologetic and all the rest.
A springful of larks and a rolling cloud, and the roadside bushes brimming with whistling blackbirds, and the sun of October, summery on the hill's shoulder. Here were fond climates and sweet singers suddenly come in the morning, where I wandered and listened to the rain ringing, wind blow cold. In the wood, far away under me.
The first time that Thomas went to America was from February to June 1950. What did they make of him? What were they expecting? A spokesperson for poetry, the spinster's friend, as Thomas himself described it, or something a little more exciting? To make a legend, you need material. Dylan Thomas's great subject was Dylan Thomas. And on that first tour, which was a huge hit, on one occasion he was moved from a 300 to a 1,000-seat auditorium. He created something uniquely modern out of what he once called the small, bone-bound island of himself. Readers had had Eliot's religion and Auden's Marxism. Now they had a new hero, one who was to prove an inspiration to the Beats, Bob Dylan and the Beatles. A small, apparently rebellious, drunken Welshman who, while not afraid of sexual profanity, preached the sacredness of individual perception, raged against systems and money, and saw heaven in a grain of sand.
What will the neighbours?
Poor Mrs. Waldo.
What she puts up with.
Never should have married.
She didn't have to.
Same as her mother.
There's a husband for you.
Bad as his father.
And you know where he ended?
Up in the asylum.
Crying for his ma.
Every Saturday.
He hasn't got a land.
Carrying on.
That Mrs. B.T. Morris.
Up in the quarry.
I've seen her baby.
It's got his nose.
It makes my heart bleed.
What he'll do for drink.
He sold the piano.
And her sewing machine.
Falling in the gutter.
Talking to the lamppost.
Using language.
Singing in the W.
Poor Mrs. Waldo.
Off stage in the house, he just liked his warm slippers and his dish of titbits and pickled onions and sardines and anything with a lot of vinegar and cockles, all put on a plate which he'd stuff into his mouth when he was listening to the cricket scores. He was just Mr. Everyman until he put on the act of being the poet, or until he wrote his poetry.
Previous to his first trip to America in 1950, Thomas's principal platform had been in London and BBC Radio, then in its heyday.
This is the British Broadcasting Corporation.
In everything that concerned the spoken word on radio, he was impeccably professional. One gets rather tired of unending stories of his drunkenness, which was often imposed upon him by his hangers-on. In my own BBC experience, he was invariably sober and conscientious during rehearsals. I've known him leave his fellow drinkers in a pub at lunchtime in order to get back to the studio and study his part before the afternoon rehearsal.
I remember I met Dylan in our nearest BBC pub, and he was drinking half a pint of bitter as usual with a cigarette jutting out of his mouth. "Hello, boy," he said to me, "I got an idea for the radio. It's all about a village that was mad. You hear people talking in their sleep and dreaming. Is it worth 50 quid advance?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Now?" And I said, "Yes." So I took him over to the copyright department and got him 50 quid advance.
We continue on our backwards journey. The American chapter of Dylan Thomas's life has not yet begun. But at home, BBC Radio has made him a household name. Thomas has come to be viewed as a kind of ancient Celtic bard, but actually he's one of the most modernistic poets of the 20th century. He loved microphone, he loved film, he loved detective stories, he loved being on. So who was this man who died so tragically in a New York hospital? An obscure, drunken, penniless poet? He wasn't actually. As we go backwards through Dylan Thomas's life, we find that in the late 40s he was a British media star whose drink of choice was a half pint of bitter. He was a key broadcaster in BBC Radio's legendary Sound Features department, nearly all of whom drank in this very pub. Between 1945 and 1953, he wrote or appeared in nearly 200 radio broadcasts and even made a television appearance, now sadly lost to us. He was a man with a reputation among his peers, a reputation for reliability.
Over Sir John's hill the hawk on fire hangs still. In a hoisted cloud at drop of dusk he pulls to his claws and gallows. Up the rays of his eyes the small birds of the bay, and the shrill child's play wars of the sparrows and such who swan sing dusk in wrangling hedges.
I came to see that there were two halves to him. There was the very serious, mature poet who matured terribly early. And there was also, I think, the little Welsh boy who never grew up. If you regarded Dylan as a toddler, I mean, toddlers are dirty and noisy and everything, but you love them. And Dylan had very much that endearing quality.
Before that first trip to America, the family had only 9 months in the boathouse. Catelyn described it as the last happy period of their lives. The boathouse had been paid for by Margaret Taylor, wife of the Oxford historian A.J.P. Taylor.
People talk a lot about Dylan's borrowing and stealing, but quite a lot of people sponged off him. When Dylan was in the money, he was incredibly generous.
Dylan used to worry terribly about it, even sleepless nights about the money. That really accumulated and got worse in the